What's going on, sexy lovers? Welcome back to the Sex Mechanic Podcast. I, of course, am your host, the Sex Mechanic, aka Jeans Benoit, aka Mr. Born to Explore, aka Confident Creator, aka The Exception, aka I Did It My Way. And this is episode number 43. Yeah, I think it's episode number 43. And we got a nice little topic for you. What's going on, Cheeks for Pooh? What's going on, Nilsa? We got a nice little topic today. We're talking about the vulva. For those of you who either have a vulva of your own or encounter vulvas from time to time, you know, in your sexual play, I think this is going to be a nice little episode for you. It'll be a teaching episode, so hopefully you're ready to learn something. Hopefully you already know all of this shit, because I'm going really basic in terms of how the vulva provides pleasure, or how you can get pleasure by playing with it, basically. So maybe you might know, maybe you don't, but either way, hopefully you learn something from it. What's going on, my boy, Mr. Fred? What's happening? So yeah, let's get into it. This came from, I don't know if you guys saw, but earlier this week I put up a post on my stories that showed, what's up? I put up a post from my stories that showed that a person was asking random people on the streets. They showed a picture of a vulva and was asking, you know, where the clitoris was. And people were just kind of like, they were guessing wrong, basically. And so that kind of gave me the idea that maybe we need to get into that conversation again and talk about the vulva a little bit more and educate people on it. If you don't know where all the parts are that I'm going to explain, don't feel bad. Don't get embarrassed. Don't be ashamed of it. I blame it on the school system. I think this should be a required part of our learning in terms of in our school system. We should be learning about the human sexual anatomy, not necessarily the whole entire body, because that's a whole nother course. That's anatomy course. But people should definitely be understanding and knowing what the or how the sexual anatomy works, what the different parts are, what they do, and how to enjoy sex, not just, you know, that you shouldn't have sex. So that's a whole nother topic about, you know, the teaching of abstinence versus actually having a backup plan for that and teaching people what to do in case they decide that abstinence is not for them. So we're going to learn some stuff today. Hopefully you're ready. And hopefully, like I said, you can learn something that you didn't know before. At the very least, maybe you'll just confirm or verify some shit you already knew. Either way, you can't really go wrong with it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over the different parts, and then I'll elaborate on certain parts while I have the picture up. And just note that this picture is just for education purposes. Everybody's vulva might look a little bit different. You know, some people have different parts that they have the same parts, but they have parts that look different. Maybe a little bit bigger, a little bit smaller in certain areas. So just understand that this is just a reference and this is not necessarily a standard by any means. So, all right, here we go. All right, so here's the picture. We'll put it up. So what we have first, and I'm just going to show you the important parts in terms of pleasure, like the most basic areas that you need to know for pleasure. So you have the pubic mound, which is at the top. Oh, and by the way, this view is if you're looking directly at the vulva from the front, or if you have a vulva of your own and you're using a mirror to look at it from down low. That would be the view that you see. So that's what this is right here. All right, so let's get back to it. We got the pubic mound, which is at the top. You have the so important clitoris right there. That's actually the clitoral head. That's not the whole clitoris. We'll go into more of, you know, the clitoris, and I'll expand on that because that's probably the most important part to know in terms of pleasure. When it comes to pleasure, the clitoris is one that everybody needs to be familiar with. Also, let's see what else we got. We have the urethral opening, That's where urination happens. You have the outer lips right here. And then you have the inner lips right there. Or inner labia, outer labia. And then you have the vaginal opening right there. That's the hymen right here. But again, I'm not going to give you too much in terms of stuff that you may not need to be too familiar with. But for sure, you want to know about the vaginal opening and the clitoral head. And over the clitoral head, I don't know if you can see that, but that's a little bit of skin right there. That's the clitoral hood, and that covers the head. Usually, the head is not exposed like that. That's just a picture that shows what it looks like when the head is exposed, and that happens when the clitoris is stimulated enough and you have blood flow going to that area, and then the clitoris comes out to play. But it's not going to look like that if there's not a lot of stimulation going and just in a regular situation. So you got to be prepared to not necessarily see that unless you bring it out. Also, to add to the clitoral head, or not the clitoral head, but the clitoris, right? So I'm going to show you a picture of the clitoris, but the clitoris actually goes all the way to the sides of or behind the labia as well. You just can't see it. Most of the clitoris is actually on the sides, and you can't actually see it. It actually looks like a wishbone, but I'll show you a picture of that as well. But the reason why that's important to note is because a lot of people think the clitoris is just the head, but there's way more to the clitoris than just the head. And if you knew that there was way more, then you would know that you can enjoy more areas and have pleasure from more areas than just the head. So that's important to be aware of. So let me pull up a picture of the clitoris, the whole clitoris, not just the head, and show you what it looks like. And again, for some people, they may not know this. So this is important to, put out there and for people to understand. So, and understand, the clitoris is just a big ass pleasure organ. That's specifically what it's there for. It's there for pleasure. And so it's got a bunch of nerve endings. I believe millions of nerve endings in it that allow the person who has the clitoris to enjoy crazy amounts of pleasure. So here's a picture of what the clitoris looks like behind what you can actually see. That's the whole clitoris actually. So that part right there is the little tip that you tend to see, which is the head or the glands. And that's the part that's showing from under the hood when you stimulate it enough and it has enough blood flow going through it. So what that means is that there's a lot more area for you to provide pleasure to, because this whole thing has nerve endings on it. So if you rub the sides, the walls or the lips of the vulva, that allows, for more pleasure as well. But on top of that, I wanted to make the point that, let's get back to this picture real quick. Something I didn't mention was this area right here is the vulva. I know it sounds super basic, but a lot of people don't actually know that. They think that's the vagina. I showed you the vaginal opening, which was at the bottom, but that's not the whole thing. The whole thing is actually called the vulva, so it's good for people to know the difference of that in order to, understand what you're actually doing when you get down there, or if you have one of your own, you can actually learn how to provide pleasure to it. If you're providing self-pleasure, or if you're involved with somebody else that might want to help you provide pleasure as well, at least now you kind of have a little bit more knowledge. So the parts I want to focus on, like I said, were the clitoris, which is basically just there for pleasure and pleasure alone. Like the clitoris literally has no other function but to feel good to the person that has it. So that's something to really take into consideration when you go down there. If maybe you're not usually focused on the clitoris, just there's kind of like a little saying that I like to, keep going or try to keep going, which is don't forget the clit. Because you can really involve the clitoris, and you probably should involve the clitoris in anything that you engage in sexually, whether that be oral sex, whether that be manual stimulation, using your fingers, whether that be penetrative sex, or intercourse as well. In all cases, you should be involving the clitoris at some point in time, if not all the way throughout, to provide maximum pleasure. One reason for that also is because during penetration or intercourse, or penetrative intercourse, what tends to happen is the clitoris doesn't get enough attention or enough, stimulation, enough pleasure, or enough pressure. And the person who has the clitoris or who has the vagina is not able to get to climax usually if the clitoris is not involved at all. And so you definitely want to keep the clitoris engaged, and you want to keep it stimulated as much as possible. Keep that stimulation going on the clitoris. And there's different ways to do that. That's not what this episode is about, so I'm not going to go too much into how the different ways you can stimulate the clitoris while you're doing different things. But just keep in mind that you should always be trying to make some kind of contact with the clitoris, no matter what you're doing down in that area. So again, whether it be oral, manual, or penetrative sex, you definitely want to somehow keep contact on the clitoris and keep that going, because the clitoris will thank you, and so will the person that has it. They will really enjoy it. Let me just say that. And that's just one way to provide pleasure, but it's definitely the easiest way to provide pleasure to a person who has a vulva, is by focusing your attention on the clitoris, or focusing a lot of your attention on the clitoris. So you'd be surprised, or not, how many people may not know, or may have not known where the clitoris was located. And hopefully, if you're watching this, then now you do understand, and you can maybe go practice with a, consensual vulva, and, kind of test your skills out and see if maybe you can play around with that and get better at it. But the other part of that was the vaginal opening as well. And what else did I say? I said the pubic mound and the outer and inner labia. Those are basically, just look at the vulva as a big ass erogenous zone. And I've had an episode about erogenous zones as well, and talking about how erogenous zones can be anywhere on the body. It doesn't have to just be the genital areas. But since we're talking about the genitals right now, the vulva is definitely all around a big erogenous zone. You don't have to focus only on the clitoris. I'm just saying that make sure the clitoris is involved with whatever you're doing, but you can give all that whole area a lot of love. You can stimulate the inner and outer labia, with your tongue or with different parts of your body. You can also stimulate, obviously, the vaginal opening as well. Not just the opening, but the vagina with penetrative sex. And, you can do different things there as well. There's a G-spot, which is inside. That's where the pubic mound actually comes in and is important. So if you are engaging in penetrative sex, right, and you are in an area or at an angle where you are stimulating the G-spot, which I talked about in another episode as well, if you're doing that, then a way to increase the stimulation in that area for the person who has the vulva or the G-spot is by putting or applying pressure onto the pubic mound. And you just want to apply a certain amount of pressure. You'll kind of test it out and see what works. You're not trying to necessarily, bust the person's pubic bone in half or anything like that. You're not trying to apply that kind of pressure, but you want to apply some pressure on the pubic mound downward. That way the friction between the G-spot and the whatever is penetrating the vagina is increased. All right, so since the G-spot is located at the top of the vagina between the I say between the G-spot area between the 9 o'clock and the 2 o'clock position, or is that 2 o'clock? I'm sorry, 9 o'clock and 3 o'clock position on the clock. All right, going that way. Knowing that, that means that pushing down on the pubic mound actually gives you a smaller clearance between the G-spot area and whatever is penetrating the vagina. So keep that in mind too, that sometimes you can apply that light pressure if you're in that area, and that can increase the pleasure for the person that is being penetrated. All right, so that's another thing. Yeah, work those lips, work the inner thighs, work that whole area. All right. I don't know too much about whether the urethra is something you want to concentrate your attention on in terms of, you know, applying pressure or pleasure, in terms of applying any kind of stimulation to. But all the other areas for sure, explore it with your tongue, explore it with whatever you're using, and see what kind of pleasure you can get out of it, and see what kind of pleasure your partner can get out of it as well. I have a funny story about that. So another reason why I started learning about sex is because in college, before I started having sex, this was freshman year, I remember two situations where I was in bed with a woman, right? And so we're laying there or whatever the case may be, and these are two women that, you know, I guess I was not involved with, but you could kind of say, like, you know, we knew that we had, you know, we liked each other or whatever the case may be. There was an attraction there. So we're laying in bed, and, you know, we're just kind of laying there next to each other, and I'm trying to remember who initiated what. I'm pretty sure that person initiated it. Like, she initiated it, right? So she put my hands down in the vulva area, right? Thinking that, you know, I already knew what to do once my hands got there. But little did she know, I had no idea. Like, I was really green in that area, and I had no idea. I had kind of an idea, but not enough. So my hands go down there, and I'm feeling around, and I'm like, ooh, okay, I feel an opening. You know what I'm saying? I feel a hole somewhere, right? And so I put a finger in there and try to start, you know, playing around with it. The person moves my hand, right? I'm like, okay, maybe I'm doing it wrong. Let me try it again. Put my hand back down there. She didn't move my hand completely. She just moved it off of that spot. So kept my hand down there, was looking again, searching, fishing for an opening. Found the opening. All right, let me do that again. Let me just do a little bit different this time, though. And same thing. The person moves my hand. And it wasn't until, and this happened maybe 2 or 3 times until nothing happened, basically. I think the women involved wanted to be, didn't want to come off as rude, but they probably should have, you know what I'm saying, I wouldn't have minded if they would have kind of gave me a little bit more guidance. The problem was my finger was going into the urethra instead of the vagina. So that can happen. If you don't necessarily know the anatomy, or you're not familiar with what parts are where, then you could also make that same mistake. So that's a memory that I'll never forget. I laugh about it now. It's, you know, I guess you could look at it as missed opportunities as well, because nothing went on further after that. You know what I'm saying? Like, that basically was the end of the night. But at the same time, I feel like it was the beginning of a very important learning experience. And it allowed me to start looking into sex in a whole nother way and start really learning about sex. It really got me on the path of self-learning when it came to the human sexual anatomy. I started looking things up online. I started reading books. I was asking questions of friends of mine around me that were already having sex. So for me, I felt like that was a good situation to be in, because it helped me, you know, really start to get into sex in a different way and learn sex in a different way. So like I said before, don't be ashamed or don't be embarrassed about the fact of you not knowing certain things when it comes to sex. I don't know everything about sex either. There's so much for me to learn when it comes to sex. But I do know what I know, but there's a lot more for me to know as well. And so for people out there also engaging in sex, don't feel bad about, not having that knowledge, because again, these are things that I feel like we should be learning in our schools, but that's not really something that that our school system holds as high priority. So we kind of get what we get, and we kind of have to learn on the fly through real life experience a lot of times. But anybody got any questions? I feel like I've gone on pretty good in terms of talking about the human sexual anatomy, at least on the side of the vulva. And also tell me too if y'all feel like I need to do one of these for the penis, because if people feel like there's some level of unfamiliarity with the penis, then I'll do an episode on that as well. So for those of you who joined late, I was talking about the vulva and just basically going through the different parts of the vulva. That's all. And in regards to the story, apparently I was all the way up here trying to play around, just wrong, all the way wrong. But again, I laugh about it now because it's kind of like I didn't know any better. Those were literally my first experiences in those situations. So, yeah, it turned out how it turned out. But yeah, those are stories I'm glad I could laugh about now. Oh, and for everybody who joined in as I was already going, what's going on? If you're still around, hey, John Dillinger says, LOL, learning experience. That's real, man. We all gotta learn at some point, right? Like some people learn at a younger age, or in some cases, some people learn at a later age and later stage in life than others do. So there's no need to feel in any way ashamed of where you started or where you start, because everybody doesn't have the same starting point. There are some people I know personally who started having sex many years before I did. I mean, you're talking about like early teens. And here I am having my first sexual encounter at 18. 18 or 19, one or the other. But either way, somewhat late when you consider how early other people have started. But it's whatever. It's fine. Wherever you start is wherever you start. Ain't nothing wrong with that. And that's something too that I think is really important when we're teaching young people, especially about sex, is like there's no race to having sex. Like you're not gonna get an award for starting to have sex at a young age, or being the first out of your group of friends to start having sex. So if we are teaching the young people about sex completely, let's also mention the part that there's no rush and sex ain't going anywhere. And if anything, you're probably more equipped to deal with sex later on, because there's a lot of other things that come with sex besides just the physical aspects. There are emotional things that happen with sex. There are parts about sex that you also need to understand before engaging, which is why I feel like it should be a part of this our learning process. Things like pregnancy and STIs. Those are things that are really important to know beforehand. But unfortunately, it's something that a lot of young people learn after they've already engaged in it, and it's at some point too late. So yeah, take your time with learning about it. There's no rush. It's not a big deal. Sex ain't going nowhere. It's been here for as long as we have. So no rush in when you start, and no rush in when you learn either, because even if you are watching this and you are 40 years old, ain't nothing wrong with that. There's no shame in it. There's a lot of people that don't know this, you know, and watching that video that I posted really helped me know that there are plenty of people out there still that don't know, you know, what you would consider the basics of the human sexual anatomy. And so if they don't know, I feel like it's part of my responsibility as a sexologist to teach them. And I'm definitely going to use my platform to do that. So I'm glad that I'm able to use my platform in this kind of way, because this is partly what I was on this planet to do, is to teach. And the avenue that I've chosen is sex. So, you know, if I have a platform to teach about sex, then I'm definitely going to do that. John Dillinger says 100. Thank you. I appreciate you. I know this is kind of a public platform for people, but if you do want to ask a question, you can ask, and I won't say your name necessarily. I'll just ask the question if you have a question about it. Miss Nielsen also says 100. I appreciate you. Thank you. Not only questions, it could also be comments. It could be maybe something you want to add. Maybe you feel like I left something out. Maybe you're somebody with a vulva that feels like there's a piece in there that I could have added that could help some people that encounter vulvas from time to time. If there is, then definitely just, you know, put it in the comments. This is one of my favorite topics too, by the way. I love talking about vulvas. I'm a vulva lover. What can I say? Today I am drinking a rum mix. I got rum, a splash of lemon juice, and a little bit of ginger ale as well. I like this mix. It's pretty good. I know usually I do cider or bubbly, but I'm not at home yet. So I just use whatever is here, and sometimes I go with the rum. I've been on the rum a little bit more lately, but that's a side note. Was there anything else y'all wanted to know about vulvas too that I might be able to answer, that I didn't answer? Anything in regards to this image or this pic? What's up, One Crochet Queen? Anything in here that, you know, I didn't mention that you feel like you want to know about, or, you know, that I need to clarify, or whatever? I'm here for y'all, so just let me know. What's going on? Glad that you could join us tonight. We've been having a good conversation about the vulva, so yeah. Just seeing if anybody has any questions or concerns or comments that they want to add about it or ask about it. And like I said before, if a person puts a question or comment in there, I don't have to say your name if you don't want. I could just say the comment, and maybe that comment could really reach somebody and help somebody out. Human Paws Inc. just joined. What's going on, Human Paws Inc.? That's a tongue twister. Welcome. We're talking about vulvas today. Or actually, we just talked about vulvas, actually. Chef Ebony Spearman joined as well. What's up? Talking about my favorite topic, the vulva. And for those of you who joined a little bit later on, I was basically just going through the diagram of a vulva and the different parts of it, explaining where the clitoris is and where the vaginal opening is in comparison to the urethra, showing the outer labia, the inner labia, and basically just letting people know where to focus their attention as well when they're involved with a vulva. Don't worry, I made sure that the focus was on the clitoris and every part of the clitoris, even when engaging in different parts of sex. So one of the highlights was me mentioning and talking about always having contact with the clitoris, or the clitoral head rather, whether you are engaging in oral sex, manual stimulation, or penetrative sex as well. Definitely keeping contact with the clitoris is a very important step, an important part to providing pleasure to oneself or to another. I'm still gonna make sure that everybody who came in doesn't have any questions or comments before I step away, because this is a very important topic. You know, I feel like this is something that affects a lot of people, and there may be some people out there who have vulvas that aren't familiar with their vulvas and don't really know all the specifics about it. So again, don't be shy about asking a question or making a comment, because if you have one, like I said, I don't have to necessarily say your name. I'll just ask the question or make the comment. But if you want the credit, then you can say that as well, and I'll give you the credit for the comment or the question. What are y'all drinking tonight, by the way, on this hump day? I told you what I had in my glass, but what are you all drinking or sipping on? This is the best thing right here. When you got a drink and you get to talk about sex, or hear about sex, or watch sex, whatever the case may be for you. But I feel like this is literally living the life when you can have a drink and also have a conversation about sex at the same time. My drink is actually done now, but I should probably re-up on that. I'll wait until we're done and I'll re-up on the drink. Alright, so if y'all don't have anything for me, then I will end it on that note. If you do have questions, concerns, comments that you feel like you want to contribute or you want to ask, DM me on or at the Sex Mechanic, and I will answer those questions for you best as possible. Also, if you have ideas for something you might want to talk about, sexual related, or something you want me to talk about that's sex, dating, situationship related, also DM me and let me know what that is, and we'll have a conversation, and I'll let you know if that's something I could talk about or not. When I say I can talk about, meaning if I have experience with it, then I'll talk about it. If I don't, then I won't. But also we could discuss if you know, a person actually wants to join on to the episode and talk about whatever they want to talk about, or have a conversation about something. So yeah, this was episode number, I want to say 43, but don't quote me on that. It might be 44 actually. But this was another episode of the Sex Mechanic Podcast. Of course, I'm your host, the Sex Mechanic. Thank you for watching live. Thank you for watching on the YouTube channel. Thank you for listening on whatever platform you like to listen to podcasts on. And this was a great pleasure for me. So I hope to see you next week, and I look forward to seeing you all next week as well. Peace out.